We bring together top leaders and experts to share their unfiltered truth about the journey to self-actualization and the path to heart-centered leadership. You'll hear raw lessons, learn ancient wisdom, and practical steps to rise to your fullest potential. Now is the time to walk into this new paradigm of leadership. Let's transcend together. Hello, and welcome back to Transcendent Leadership. We are back in the studio in Vegas. I feel like I've been living here so much lately with another new and dear friend of mine, Cam MacDougall. And it is very special that we're here today because we're going to dive into some pretty edgy, but also really important topics. And before we get into any of that, I want to give you a little bit of a formal introduction. Cam is a transformational expert, coach, public speaker, breathwork facilitator, and host of the Ignite You podcast. He is a passionate individual whose life has been a deep journey of transformation. From battling addiction and crime and violence, he has emerged with crystal clear clarity and an unwavering passion for helping others. As a transformational specialist, he has spent the past 7 years utilizing the powerful embodiment method to guide business owners and leaders towards achieving extraordinary feats they once believed were impossible. Wow. Thank you for being here, Kim.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Carissa.
I have had such an enjoyable time getting to know you the last couple of days in person. And, you know, even when we dropped in the first call, there was this really deep resonance with who you be in the world. And before we dive into all the things that you do and all the ways that you show up, I just want to honor you just as a man showing up, doing the work, but also not even doing the work, but like really creating space for other people to do their work and show up in love. It is so evident to me how embodied you are. And I was just saying right before this that the energy that you bring to a space is undeniably palpable and is just a testament to your journey and what you've walked through. So just fucking thank you for being you, brother. Really appreciating you.
Thank you. Receiving all of that. Truly, truly, truly. It's been such a gift and such an honor to share that with you, with our new friends, these amazing humans we've connected with. And, you know, I receive all of that. And I also want to add that it's easy around people that are also doing very similar things, right? It's that whole mirror factor where, you know, for me, it's very easy to stand in my embodiment when I'm around other people that are in their embodiment. And so it's been such a refreshing, such a beautiful experience this past week to share with all of you, to just be in that energy of truth, rawness, openness, you know. And there's a lot of people that, you know, we talk about transformation and want to do these things, but it's becoming harder to find people that are very, very real, you know, very real and really pushing those edges and pushing those limits and really dedicated to staying the student amongst high levels of success and growth. So I'm receiving that. And I'm also reflecting to you that you make it easy to be that way because of what you embody.
Thank you so much. I see you, brother. Thank you. Yes. And to kind of kick us off here, I know that your journey has not always been like this. And I want to invite people to get a clear picture of a little bit of your background so that there's a level of understanding and maybe even appreciation, which is why I feel like I can hold that at least the level that I can with you, because there's an understanding of your come from. So give us a little bit of your backstory around how you got to this point where you're at now.
Yeah. A lot of pain.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of pain, a lot of confusion, a lot of not knowing who I was, a lot of pretending that I was something that I wasn't, a lot of testing the boundaries of society as well as my own being, you know, and from the world of, you know, being diagnosed as a young kid with behavioral disorders to being a drug dealer in and out of juvenile detention to, you know, becoming a finance executive that had ridiculous substance abuse problems to becoming a chef and all of these different things. These are all these evolutions that I went through that made me the person that I am today, but were manifestations of a lot of my pain, a lot of my challenges. And I'm a huge believer that, you know, our past is always to be honored, right? But there's so many components of that a lot of us want to discard. And for me, to sum it all up, because I can go into any of those masks or any of those worlds if you would like me to, but to sum it all up, the way that I feel I've gotten to where I am, which is still a student, still learning, is taking each of those experiences, loving on them, understanding them, and embodying the codes that each one of them gave me, no matter how dark, no matter how ugly it was. And that's kind of been the theme of my journey until now. And I still deal with it. I'm still moving through things. I'm still learning to alchemize unintegrated aspects of myself, but that's kind of a bit of a synapse in how I roll. It's kind of moving from that pain to power, that pain to passion, and really using it as the catalyst for my growth and my transformation.
Yeah, beautifully said. Really resonate with what you just said around loving those parts of you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk right now, which is beautiful, about self-actualization, human potential, what's actually possible in our psyche, in our body, and kind of pushing these limits. And I think that there's often this misinterpretation that you only like work on your strengths and you're just developing. And there is this misconception that you're discarding, or like these parts of you are just gone or dying off. And my experience with this work has been really loving the parts of you that feel unlovable is actually what helps you integrate. And then therefore the natural progression of that is reaching your potential. Exactly. It's not simply striving. It's really looking at the shadow aspects, the darker parts, the things that you don't want to look at, and really honoring that part of you and loving that part of you. Would you say that you agree? And could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think they're the nuggets that we're given by the divine, by God, by source. They're the pieces of the puzzle that if used properly show us exactly what we're here to learn. You know, I'll go back to my time as, you know, as a drug dealer, as a criminal. I hurt a lot of people, right? I was the aggressor, you know, and I did a lot of really bad things that harmed a lot of people. A lot of people have asked me, do you regret it? Do you wish it didn't happen? And my answer is always no. And for a lot of people to hear, that's very triggering, because they're like, well, if you did bad things, wouldn't you regret that? And now people that meet me, they go, wow, you're this loving, caring, compassionate, present person. I wouldn't be that if it wasn't for that on my journey, right? That's been my evolution. And the reason why I can love on every single human I come in contact with, no matter how dark they get, no matter how light they are, is because I've seen the darkest of dark, and I've seen the darkest of dark within myself. And knowing that the darkest of dark within myself did not actually mean that I was that person has really helped me go so deep into seeing who people really are beyond the shit that people label them with. And so that's just a prime example of using a unintegrated, scary, shadow, very socially unacceptable part of myself to leverage as a tool to become a very open, you know, individual that has the capacity to hold anything. Nobody can weird me out with what they come to me with, because I've been the darkest version of myself. And so I have the capacity to see past that in people. So no, I don't regret that. Do I feel for the people that I harmed? Yeah, of course, right? Naturally. And at the same time, those people also taught me how to truly love, right? Because had I not done that, I wouldn't know what true love and true compassion and true softness looked like. So I honor those people. And I've done a lot of work in reaching out to a lot of those people and reconnecting with those people through a lot of my practices. But it's in that you really find the beauty.
Yeah, it's in that stark contrast. And in some ways, what I hear you saying too is, you can really only take people as deep as you've been willing to go with yourself. And it seems like, what I've heard of you with your clients and things like that, the journeys that you go on them with. And like you just said, people can come to me with anything because I've met that in myself. I found in my own experience, the emotions I've had harder times dealing with clients are the ones that I have had a hard time dealing with and confronting with myself.
For sure.
Yeah. And something that you mentioned yesterday, which I want to explore with you is, kind of your bigness or the too muchness. And can you talk about what that journey has been like for you, or what that even means to you? Like, what is that, like, too much?
Yeah. Thank you for this question.
Yeah.
Thank you. So as you said, I'm working on this, right? And I always like to highlight this for people that are listening is that, we're all still in the work and we're still doing it all, right? And that's a very important distinction. The moment we stop doing the work, the moment we've stopped practicing what we preach, right? And so for me, my big evolution right now is really coming into this like powerful, fiery, but grounded version of myself. But there's limitations there, because if I go back to my childhood, I go back to, when I was involved with all these things on the streets, I was this wild, crazy young version of myself that made all these claims and made all these decisions and all of these things that got therapists saying I needed drugs, got the school saying they couldn't handle me, got my parents depressed and anxious about where I was going to go, got me in trouble, put me in prison. So all of these things that I've been through have created this subconscious program within me that if I'm a full expression of myself, it won't be accepted. And so that has carried into my 37 years of life, right? Where now, even though I'm in this resonance that I'm in now, there's still this part of me that's like, can I say that? Can I really go all in? Can I really show my whole truth? Or are people going to go, oh, there it is again. Let's isolate him. Let's discard him. Let's say his ideas are crazy, right? Because growing up, I dropped out of school because I was like, do you guys not see what's going on here? Right? It was this, I was like, this is all bullshit.
You knew that?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
I was like, this is a crock of shit. I was like, hey teacher, your shit is prevalent. Like I could see them.
Yeah.
And then I was like, none of this is applicable to my life. None of this is applicable to what I'm interested in. None of this is applicable to anything. So I didn't go, I didn't study, I didn't listen. And I rebelled against all of that. That was an ideology that now I'm like, the school system's fucked.
Yeah, you were a wise one.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think a lot of youth in particular that go through a lot of trouble, they are very wise.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot that come from trauma. Yes, there's a lot that are their environmental byproducts, but a lot of them are really fucking smart. And a lot of them are like, I'm not playing the game. And then you don't play the game, you end up in another environment. Right? So it's through that experience, it's through that knowledge and that being that I got in a lot of trouble and that I was discarded from society, and it was an ideology. Now I've got a lot of ideologies, right? Once again, coming from a very different place, bear in mind. And there's still that belief in the back of my mind that they might not be accepted. And if that is the case, I'm isolated again.
Yeah. As you're talking, that's part of the reason why I feel so deeply connected to you. I haven't mentioned this to my audience in a long time, but I have a history with substance use, drugs, all of that as well. Very similar. When I was in middle school, going into high school, I was kicked out for having drugs, and I was dating a drug dealer, and many of my wild expression was punished. I remember walking into a room with my mom on the phone with my father saying, I don't know what to do with her. We need to send her away.
Right.
And that memory came to me only a couple of years ago when I was doing a lot of like healing work. I was like, wow, this is so deeply ingrained. No wonder I'm afraid. And I still, I still have that. We were talking about that last night. There's still this wild part of me that feels like she's caged and wants to come out. And I think many people can really resonate with this awakening of our more primal part of ourselves that is wild, that does want to be unapologetic and fully expressed. But there's so much programming, and there's been a lot of like isolation. Like I was kicked out of school. I went to an alternative school. Like you're going to be put away. And it goes against our psychology to belong, right? You think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need to belong in a tribe, in a community. So it makes sense that that's a mechanism to really quiet that part of us. And so for you, it's, you know, this bold, wild, courageous, expressed part of you wants to come out right now. You know, what is that? If you were unapologetic and if you were fully expressed, what does that look like? And also, what is the belief that's currently holding you back? Is there like one thread, or is there just a general overall, this is going to happen to me again? What do you find that is the point that's kind of keeping you not like, where's the soft spot right now?
So the beliefs have very much so been rewired. Now it's the nervous system. So for instance, it's my version of that is to just, for instance, just unapologetically put myself out there for all the speaking gigs, all the podcasts, finishing my book, all these different pieces, like, and to just throw it out there in a very bold way, right? And to not be like, well, you know, because I'm almost done my book, and to be like, well, is it okay for me to put this in? How's this going to resonate with people?
So much questioning,
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Or it's along the lines of, you know, is my audience going to like this? How are people going to relate to it? Because the thing about my story is that it's kind of unique in the sense, like there are people that come from that space, but there's this concept or this idea that it's like, okay, well, as an aggressor, right? As somebody that's not a victim to something, are people going to be able to resonate with it? Right. And so there's kind of this energy of like, how do I do this? How do I do that? But I know that none of that matters.
Yeah.
I know that as long as this is speaking, everything else is irrelevant because God, the divine spirit, is flowing through it when I'm in my heart. So my version of that is to just unapologetically always speak from my heart in every single circumstance, and to never hold back if I feel that. Right. And for me, there's that I'll feel it. And then there's it's like the nervous system kicks in to like, it's that safety. Well, can you really share that? Is that okay? Is that, you know, going to put us at risk of being isolated again? And the nervous system holds back because, you know, being put in prison is a very intense thing, right? And I went to jail for the first time in my life when I was 14 years old. I was a child, right? 16, 17. All of these years, I'm a baby, right? And at the time, I didn't register this, but
those are such formative years.
Years of your life, right? And so you have this, like, you start to question the self, right? You start to develop these ideas of, oh my God, I can't actually do what I feel, right? And so there's, you know, I'll take it back even further to before I went there. There was these, I was known as this kid that would have these like energetic eruptions. So I'd be sitting in class and I would just be like, and it would build and it would build and it would build and I would just pop. It was like I would scream or I would cry and I would start running around. And I would run out of the school and I'd have it's so funny now, I'd have like 3 teachers chasing me around this school and I'd just be like, right? I couldn't control it.
Yeah.
But it was just energy moving through me.
Yeah.
And everyone tried to clamp it down, kick me out of school, put me in the principal's office, put me in prison, clamp it down. Now I know that energy is a fucking gift.
Totally.
Like the ability to harness that, which is what my journey has taught me, is a fucking gift. And now when that's directed in the right direction, it's so powerful. Yet the subconscious is still like, it gets clamped down. It gets clamped down. It gets clamped down. So now it's about putting myself in these circumstances where I'm really speaking my truth and being seen in that, being validated in that, not from a place of seeking or needing validation, but from a place of environmental orientation to calm the nervous system, to get it to a place where it's ready to move through that resistance and not hesitate.
Yeah, very powerfully said. The visual of you running, I'm thinking there's so much that this child has to give and say that other people are not ready to hear or be with. And wow, like my heart goes out to that child and also celebrated in the man who's in front of me, because you still have that energy about you. And now you're saying that you're harnessing it in a different direction, and that a part of that is really understanding how to regulate your nervous system so that you can do that.
Yes.
So how are you regulating your nervous system? What are your practices? What are things that really help you do that?
Breathwork's my favorite by far. You know, I'm really into this concept of capacity. Right. And so for instance, over the course of my life, I had this clamp down energy. My nervous system has a level that it reaches of activation that is a capacity, right? It has a capacity, it has a limit. If it's full of thinking that I'm going to be clamped down, that's always what I'm going to believe. That's always how I'm going to act.
Right.
When I do breath work, when I do somatic release, rage rituals, when I do, you know, various forms of, you know, like Osho dynamic meditations, like very cathartic, very, you know, powerful releases in an intentional way connected to my heart, I start to seep that stuff out. I start to clear it out.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as a, you know, a sheet of paper individually is nothing, but you get a stack of paper, it's really heavy. And over the course of our lives, we develop this huge stack of paper. So breathwork journeys, swipe off a couple pages, you know, a rage release swipes off a couple pages, a couple more come in, you know, you go back in and you just keep working away at swiping away those pieces of paper so that your nervous system can actually relax and not feel like it's carrying the world that you've experienced on its shoulders. Right? So rage release, breath work. I love Osho for a lot of his laughing meditations, crying meditations, dynamic meditations. And then also, you know, we talked about it last night in the sexual space. There's also a lot of wild warrior work to do. And there's also a lot of softening to do. There's a lot of relaxation. There's a lot of working with the vagal nerve, right? Working with this more soft, safe energy. So it's this combination of really releasing those bits of energy that were clamped down, and then also moving into feeling like it's safe to just be. It's safe to just be, which can come from being held by a somatic practitioner, which can come from being held by my partner. It can come from Ryan and I, like we touch each other and we like hold each other as men. To be held by a man in a way that's like a brotherhood is so calming for the nervous system. So there's a wide spectrum of what I do, but you know, there's a lot of pieces in there that I think people can try and experiment with, and whichever ones speak to you, whichever ones feel right, you know, really go into those because they're going to serve you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you highlighted the soft ones too, because the rage release and some of these other practices, breath work, even cold plunges, those can be considered, you know, like challenge, masculine, hard. So let's talk about some of those practices and maybe what you think this is my opinion and interpretation, that in some ways there's men who may be fearful of engaging in those practices out of fear that they will come across as feminine, or maybe not having a full awareness around needing maybe to integrate aspects of their feminine. So can you talk about these softer practices, why they're important to the masculine? And yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah, I love this question. Growing up the way that I did, I thought that being a man was being the warrior archetype. that we see in the movies. Resilient, powerful, never wavering. That's a part of it. But only sticking to that is an unintegrated part of it. Because the true warrior goes to battle to protect, fights only if he has to, tries to make peace, and if he can't, then defends. After that happens, he returns home, loves his wife, loves his children, is soft, is gentle. He can come home covered in blood and come into softness, right? To me, that is what it means to be a real man, right? Staying in that conventional idea of what it means to be a man is fear. And a lot of men are like, I'm scared to show my feminine side. Fear is not a part of the warrior archetype. It's not. A warrior is not afraid. A warrior is curious. A warrior will always push his own boundaries to come more into his power and into his softness because he knows he has a duty to protect and a duty to love. If that warrior does not come into softness, he's stuck in protection. That's only half of the coin. You have to learn how to love. And the only way you learn how to love is by softening. And the best teachers for love, for men, is the feminine. And not from a place of them needing to give it to us. And this is where a lot of men come into these challenges, is they find a partner that does that for them. And then they become codependent.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, oh, I need that for my softness. Otherwise, I'm always in my hardness.
Yeah.
But we need to learn from the feminine to embody aspects of her being so that we can resource ourselves. And in resourcing ourselves, we create so much more capacity for us to actually love our family, to actually have this other side of the coin. And so if there's men listening to this that are afraid of the softness, are afraid of these more feminine aspects of your being, my question for you is, how committed are you to really being a warrior? Because a warrior is not afraid of going into the places that are uncomfortable. A warrior seeks that. And that's really important as a distinction. So for me, I realized this and I said, okay, yeah, I'm good at being the tough guy, right? But can I have a guy yelling at me, saying all these things, and be able to see his pain and love on him and walk away out of compassion for both of us and know that that's actually stronger, being passive, than putting my fist through his face? That right there is power, right? Every time I got into a fight, I was just trying to prove that I was somebody that I wasn't. I was trying to show people that I was the toughest, show people, because I didn't believe it myself. Right? So the more that I came into softness, the more I realized that being passive was actually more powerful than being the aggressor, than being someone that was extremely intense. Coming into that softness is so important. And there's a lot of ways you can do that, right? But it comes into receiving. It comes into surrendering. It comes into trusting. It comes into loving, right? Those compassionate aspects of ourselves. And so that's what my journey has been, is moving from uber aggressor to softening, and balancing out the equation.
Reminds me of, I don't know if you're familiar with Aubrey Marcus and the warrior poet.
I know Aubrey Marcus. I haven't. I
that's his sort of
Okay.
concept of exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
There's the warrior who goes out and battles, and the poet who's like very in touch with his softness and his feminine side and his writing and expression.
Yeah.
So it just reminded me of that, because I admire him, Aubrey, for his level of embodiment and where he's at in his journey with that. And it just reminded me of what you're talking about. And so, there's a lot you shared there. And so I'm curious if you could synthesize it to one or two sentences. Why are men afraid of the feminine, like integrating the feminine of their own feminine? What would you say it is? Or disconnected from it?
Because they're really afraid of their true power.
Wow. I think that's really confronting.
For sure.
Which is why it's like, oh, it's because it's soft. It's like, no, if you actually came into your softness, that would be your true power. And it reminds me of Marianne Williamson, whom I love so much, talks about, you know, our greatest challenge is that we're afraid, like, of who am I to do this? Who am I to be this? Of actually our true power and our true nature.
Definitely. Definitely. And it's a byproduct of society, right? And I think that's a very important thing for a lot of people to remember and to realize, is that it's kind of like what we talked about last night. The masculine is glorified. Uber masculine, toxic masculine is glorified, right? So we think more money, more power, more things, more aggression, more manly shit
outside of you
of you is the answer to being a man. But that's because, in my opinion, society has tucked away the feminine because it knows how powerful that is. It's very hard to control the feminine, right? We talk about the wild woman archetype. We talk about the passivity. We talk about the ability to just look and be like, no. Very hard to control that. When we're in this frantic state of sympathetic nervous system activation that toxic masculinity or toxic masculine energy is in, it's very easy to control us. And so this is what I play with, because I'm a renegade. I fucking hate people telling me what to do. And so when I'm like, wait, society's orchestrating this energy, there must be a reason. I'm like, I'm going to play another game. I'm going to play with this energy that you're saying is wrong, that you're saying is passive, that you're saying should be discounted. And I'm like, oh, why were you burning witches? Right? Why? Because they were fucking powerful. That's why. And the energy that they carried was compromising, was threatening this bullshit that they were building. And so for me, I'm like, okay, I'm not playing that game. I'm going into this because that's more powerful. And when you balance out the two, just like the feminine needs to bring in the masculine, you have magic.
Oh, wow. I hope this is really landing for all of you. And if it's not, maybe it will later, because there really is this feminine awakening happening for all of us. And I was sharing a little bit about my journey with you last night. It was interesting because this morning I couldn't sleep last night. I'm on like I'm like 30 minutes of sleep. And I woke up this morning after like just vibing with you guys last night and just feeling so permissioned by you and inspired by you and what you're talking about here from a both masculine and feminine perspective. These are both things important for whole-bodied beings. And I had this different like outfit plan, and I was like, no, I want to wear this shirt. And then I was like, wait, am I going to be too much? Is my hair going to be too big and wild? And I was like, fuck yeah. It's going to be big. And whatever, if I'm a little exposed, like, this is what I want to wear. This is what I will feel good in.
Yes.
And I think as we continue to follow these feelings, these nudges, and get really curious about why are they saying this is weak? You know, even as a woman in business, this is something I often confront within myself. Do I still believe that my feminine is weak and that she's powerless and that if I soften into her, which is so my journey right now, even more so than ever, is my life going to completely fall apart? And I really feel for men in this way because there's so much more programming for that around men, and that it sort of requires people to go first and do the thing that we're all kind of afraid to do, and walk that path and be like, oh, there is another way, and challenge that status quo. And so, you know, with this sort of permissioning aspect, what are you in your life really confronting or permissioning for yourself? Or where's an edge that you're meeting that's related to these masculine and feminine dynamics?
Yeah. All right, we'll go in. You know, we talked a bit about some of this last night, but for me, it's now coming into really feeling what it's like to be submissive in a safe space. And we'll go into the topic of shibari as an example. growing up, I was belly shackled and foot shackled, multiple times. And I was actually harmed in those positions where I couldn't defend myself. And when you're in jail and you're remanded, what happens is they put you in a bus, they take you to the courthouse, then they take you back to jail after the courthouse, and then you kind of do that while you're going to court. And so every time you go to court, you're belly shackled and you've got a chain going from your wrist down to your feet. Your feet are shackled together, so you can't really move. You're doing this kind of like shuffle when you walk. And kids would get completely beat up by other kids in the back of the van, and it was just chaos back there, right? You had gang conflicts all coming together in one place, and it was just a mess. So a lot of trauma occurred in those circumstances. And so one of my biggest challenges right now is letting somebody tie me up so I can meet that traumatic experience. And so an edge that I'm going into is in the space of shibari is finding a man, because it was all men, to tie me up and to dominate me in that sense, but in a safe space, to recalibrate my nervous system. And to me, that's an edge, right? I've done a lot in the sense of, I've done a lot of breath work. I've done a lot of talk therapy. I've done a lot of ceremony, plant medicine, all these different things. And what I've learned is that the somatic expression of this is the most potent. And it's really feeling these things that we're really afraid of and really going into them, but making sure that it's in a container that's conducive to not being re-traumatized and to really healing. Right. And so for me, like, this is a very private thing. It's an edge for me, but it's really important for me to express this to people, because these are the types of things that we need to normalize in order to heal. These are the types of things that we need to feel safe enough to go into to heal. I work with a lot of women with sexual trauma. The reason I work with a lot of women with sexual trauma is because of what I represent, what I look like. When I lead them on a breath session, I've had, clients who have gotten immense healings from me just coming in the room and closing the door and us being in there together. Right? That's because it's a safe yet similar representation to probably the circumstance that happened that caused the trauma. Right?
Yeah.
And so the more that we can put ourselves in these circumstances that help us meet that fear and go into that edge from a place of safety. And that's what I really want to reiterate here, is it has to be safe. You have to have immense discerning, but that's where you really start to see massive immediate shifts in your state of being, and you start to see immediate regulation of the nervous system upon completion.
Yeah, it's similar to that of ceremony, set and setting.
Exactly.
What is the intention? What is your mindset? And what is the setting? And so, continuing to highlight that this is a very edgy topic, and I really admire your vulnerability and willing to share that here. These are topics that I have not necessarily dove into out of my own fear of talking about this, but knowing that this exists within me, and I want to have these conversations. I want to be talking about this more openly, because had I not heard other people that I respected in the personal development, self-help, spiritual space having these conversations, I would have felt totally alone. When I started to get really curious about BDSM and that area, I guess, more or less in terms of sexuality and exploration, if I didn't hear that people talk about that on a podcast, I would have thought I was alone. And so I was thinking back as well, hearing on podcasts and hearing people talk about, on one hand, your trauma, will continue to sort of recreate itself and manifest in your environment until it comes to resolution. It's part of the reason why sometimes you attract the same situation or partner, etc. What I'm hearing you say is, in some ways, you're intentionally recreating that situation as a means to be proactive and confront it first. And so that's, that's really courageous and brave from both standpoints of a societal thing, as I was sharing with you last night, as well as this is something that had already really happened to you. So this runs really deep. And so I really admire that you're willing to do that and want to, highlight for people that these sexual energy is really powerful energy and can really, in a safe space, can alchemize. And this is part of the reason why it's been so shunned in our society.
For sure.
Right? Like, yeah, don't do that. Don't dress like that, etc. I remember, growing up dressing a certain way and parents saying like, you're going to get abducted or you're going to get raped, and feeling like, wow, my sexuality is not safe. I am at risk if I'm dressing in a way that feels good to me. And so, yeah, wanting to highlight for people that, these conversations are important to dive into, and the discernment about who you're having the conversation with, where you're exploring these topics is even more so important. And so with that, can you talk a little bit about places that you might be aware of, or resources or places that people can start? Because I know at the beginning, I didn't really know where to start. It only was happenstance that a friend had a conversation with me about a party where I could explore some of these concepts in. Are you comfortable maybe talking a little bit about where people can start with this? Because it feels daunting. Like, do I read a book? Do I read a podcast? Do I talk to a friend? Sure, those might be places to start for sure. And that's probably good for your threshold and your capacity to start. And then after that, like, where do you go? What do you do?
Yeah, and this is a really interesting topic, and Ryan and I, who I co-host Ignite You with, we're talking about this last night on the drive after we left, and the world of sexuality is a very interesting place because it is the most powerful form of energy. But because of that, it attracts two very opposing forces. It brings a very beautiful light energy, and then it brings the darkest of the dark to the table. So it's a place that requires a lot of, like you're saying, discernment. For me, I have played in the temple space. And the temple space is a space where it's held by a tantrika, usually, who's trained in the temple arts. And generally she has co-facilitators, or he has co-facilitators, if it's a male facilitator. And they create a container and an environment around ceremony, around prayer, around consent, around like really connecting in with everybody. And they open up the floor to exploration of sexuality, all the way from cuddling to orgies. It really does not matter, right? It's there's the whole spectrum. You can go there and be like, I want to know what it's like to have you rub your hands through my hair, and let's just try that. Or I want to know what it's like for you to lick chocolate off my arm, right? Like you can do these little things and you can explore. And they also really preface that no is more important and should be celebrated more than yes. So it's going into a container where you really learn to speak your truth, and it's in a safe place that you can. So if someone approaches you and says, I would like to do X, you can close your eyes. You can feel into their energy. You can feel into the energy of the request. You can tune into your body, and you can go, no. And that person says, thank you.
That's a complete sentence. Yeah.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. And you don't have to say anything. And I love that you said no is a complete sentence, because it is. You don't have to justify. You don't have to validate. You don't have to make them feel better. They're all coming into this container knowing that rejection is a part of the human experience. Right? So that's where I have played. Now, temples are hard to find, right? And this is why I spend a lot of my time in places like Bali and Costa Rica and these more unconventional hubs where a lot of people like us congregate. And I spend probably 6 to 7 months a year in these places, not just for temples, but because of the environment, right? Yeah. That they're available. It's
the
that
kind
type
of people
of place
that they attract.
Exactly.
That space. It's like, wow, just being around people who are open about these things. It's like There's so much fucking freedom.
Yes.
In that.
There
really is.
There is. And you have to be very careful.
Yeah.
Because in the town that I was in, there were temples that I would say, yes, go to. And then there were temples that I would say to people, no, I wouldn't go to that because it's leaky. Right. And so it's very important to learn the distinction between a leaky container and a solid container.
Yeah.
Right. And really getting clear on what that means for you, because people do take advantage of sexuality. Yeah. And they take advantage of these containers, right? They go there, they want to go and they just want to play and they want to have fun and they want to have sex and they want to pick up individuals. And to me, I never judge a person's experience, but you have to be able to see that. And you have to be able to go, you're not here for the right reason, so I'm going to keep my space.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's very important to get into that. And this leads to kind of the other place that I wanted to go, and that's that there's not enough places like this that are solid. You know, there really aren't. And Ryan and I were talking about this last night where we were saying, you know, where do we send people like that? And to be honest, you know, we're starting to think about how do we create that? So it's hard to find right now. And there, you know, you can go to, and what I would say for someone that's really wants to explore this is just start with Tantra, right? Start with getting into the Tantric arts, right? And Tantra is a massive, massive realm, but get into the sexual side of Tantra. Go to a beginner class. You know, find a practitioner that like you resonate with. Go to a beginner class, learn about eye gazing, learn about breathing, learn about self-pleasure, learn about these aspects of yourself that you can start to fine tune so that when you go into a container like a temple, which is much more advanced Tantra, you know, you can tell, right? And I went to a lot of Tantric workshops and have been in a lot of different Tantric containers, and over the course of that I could be like
yeah,
right? And I learned a lot so that when I went into temple finally I was equipped with the tools to make sure that I had a positive experience.
Yeah, there's definitely some prerequisites here. And some of which might require you to take a look at what's driving you to go in the beginning. When I initially got really curious about this space, I was not aware of my sexual trauma. I was aware that something happened. I wasn't aware of who it was or what happened until like a year later. And so there was this curiosity on my sexual energy and my like all of this. And I wasn't ill-equipped, but I wasn't very well equipped to get in this space. And so I think there is sort of this like this precursor, this prerequisite to before you go in these spaces. How do you practice this at home with yourself? How can you create these settings first within you? And I did do that. There was self-pleasure practices. There was reading books. There was just engaging in this space without engaging physically in the space.
Yes.
You know, which can be also, if I'm not mistaken, in the temple, you can go and you can just watch.
Totally.
You don't have to engage.
Nope.
Right? It's better to leave wanting more than to leave wishing you had not engaged more. And so that is a really important thing. And I'm so glad you're highlighting that. And I'm also glad that you're considering creating these spaces, because as we're having these conversations, it is interesting around, where do people go for this? And not only do where people go for it, where do people go for a space that is of integrity?
For sure. And the cool thing that I like to highlight here is that it's across the spectrum of human existence, right? Sexuality is just a representation of like how we interact with life.
Totally.
Right? How we connect sexually is how we live, right? It's a full representation across the board, right? So, you know, one thing that's pretty fascinating is, okay, maybe sexuality is too much of a hot topic for an individual, right? When's the last time you just went wild in nature?
Totally.
When's the last time you just rolled around in mud and screamed and played and just got into that wild side of yourself? Like, when's the last time? And most people are like, I've never done that. And it's like, okay, well, you don't need to go into a BDSM situation, at temple to kick things off. Like, go into nature go in a bathing suit, and then the next time do it topless, and then the next time do it naked, and see how these things feel in your body, you know, and then go skydiving. You know,
This sounds like my exact path, right? Actually, well, this is exactly what I did.
Right?
It's like naked in nature, skydiving.
Right? Because you're learning to squeeze the juice out of life, right? And that's the thing I think that I want to add to this, because, you know, we can get all sultry and talk about sexuality, right? But there's also this aspect of play and fun and experience that comes in, and aliveness, right? It's life force energy. So you don't have to have sex to play with that. Like when you're jumping out of a plane, you're feeling that, oh, I feel so alive. When you're naked in nature for the first time, you're like, oh, I feel so alive, right? And it's just like in sex, you look at climax, it's like, I feel so alive, right? It's all a representation of this same energy. So, you know, maybe for some going into sexuality is too much right now, but it's like you have so many different areas in your life that you can experience this, right? Go on a beautiful trip and do shit, you know, say yes to the things you'd usually say no to, and say no to the things you'd usually say yes to. You know, we're talking about Michael Singer and the surrender experiment. You know, flip the script on the pattern, right? And start dabbling in, like, someone invites you to go to something and your natural reaction's no, be like, wait a minute, I'm going to go. I'm going to go, right? I'm going to go do this thing and follow that, because that's that exhilaration of life, you know, and that's the excitement, that's the play, that's the joy, and that's going to transition into your sex life. Your sex life is going to transition into that, and you're going to start to just find this beautiful dance with life. And, you know, we were talking a bit about this last night, but the fear for a lot of people is I'm going to get lost, right?
Yeah. I'm never going to come back.
I'm never going to come back. I'm going to become this loincloth wearing shoeless tantrika in the jungle, and I'm going to throw my whole life out. It's like
literally my fear.
Right? But if that's your path, maybe it is, right? Yeah. But for most of us, that's not.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, how do we create space in our lives to dip into these experiences of going wild, to dip into these experiences of playing with pleasure? And how do we then bring these codes back to really falling in love with the lives that we live? You know, a lot of times in our retreats, before we go there, we have a lot of lead up, you know, calls, and we work on a lot of this stuff in our retreats, and not the sexual stuff, but we work on a lot of the, like, coming alive. And in the lead up, people are like, well, you know, what if I like hate my life after this, and I don't want to go back, and I want to stay in what you guys have created? And it's like, that's not your journey, right? Your journey is to take codes and energy from this container that we're creating to come back and share it with the people that you love, so that you can be of service to humanity, service to yourself, service to humanity, right? You come in, you play, you charge up, you're like, oh, this is what it feels like. And then you share that, and you replicate it in these little ways throughout the course of your life, right? You don't have to be in Bali or Costa Rica to take your shoes off and watch a sunset. Yeah. Right? You don't have to be in Bali or Costa Rica to go into nature and smell the trees, to smell the moisture, the moss, the dirt. You can do all of that, right? And you have so many cool things you can do. And these retreats, these experiences are designed to help you unlock things so that you can become more creative in how you do it within your life, so that you enrich your life. And in my opinion, that's how we stay integrated. Because a lot of people will come and then they get trapped, they get in that cycle, and they're like, I'm never leaving this. But then you're running. Yeah. Then you're running. And for some, it's their path. Yeah. Right? But for a lot, it's like, I don't want to go back to this. Yeah. This is really important. And the medicine you're getting here is going to make this so much better. You know, your partners are going to feel it. Your employees are going to feel it. If you have kids, they're going to feel it. Everyone's going to start feeling it. You know, I just got off a call with one of my clients who has 3 kids this morning, and we're working on all of this. And she's so alive. Like, she hasn't gone to any retreat. She's just been exploring these aspects of herself to play with these things she never thought she could do. And she's like, oh my God, energy's flowing. I'm so excited. I'm just loving my kids. My sex life with my partner and my husband is amazing. We're just like firing on all cylinders. It's not rocket science. And it's available for everybody. So if the sex stuff scares you, which it scares a lot of people. Yeah. It scared me at first. It scared me at first.
Yeah, it's edgy.
Bring it back a bit. Yeah. There's a lot of other things to do. that will most likely play into that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're saying in some ways is like what you're really looking for is the feeling that you think that these things are going to give you.
Exactly.
And so the aliveness that comes from sexuality can also come from these other aspects, right? Mm-hmm. It reminds me of when you're saying, say yes to the things that you've formally said no to a couple of weeks ago. And I haven't shared this publicly, but I'm meeting so many edges just having this conversation with you. But this is what transcendent leadership is about.
Yes.
Is about transcending beyond limitation and really expressing your multidimensionality in your leadership, in your influence, in your work. So that's what it's about. And in the middle of the week, my friend's like, do you want to go take LSD in the mountains on a Wednesday? And I was like, I got fucking calls tomorrow. And I like started noticing and I was like, no, I want to go.
Right.
And I went and it was so exhilarating. So nature can be one of the really prominent ways to access this aliveness because you're disconnected from the matrix and the things that pull you out of your normal day to day. And there's something really primal about being in that space. And so speaking of psychedelics, I know that you really help people explore these altered states. So what are some of the ways that you do that? I know breathwork is one of them. Are there other ways that you explore altered states within yourself and your own space that you could offer our audience as we begin to wrap up?
Yeah, definitely. So you've named it. Breathwork is my go-to. I'm obsessed with endogenous production of DMT. That's something that fascinates me.
Yeah.
I just did a podcast with a neurologist on that, actually. It was really fun to drop into that. But I also love the plants. I'm a fan of the plants and the plant kingdom. I'm actually going into a psilocybin ceremony in 3 days. There's this dome in the middle of the forest. So I'm going into my own ceremony to do my work. So psilocybin's one that I like to use as an ally on the journey. Ayahuasca is a friend of mine. Bobenzana is a friend. I did a dieta last year down in the Amazon solo with Bobenzana and ayahuasca, and that was profound. And in that journey, the deepest lesson that I got from her was, your life is so fucking great, go live it.
Oh, wow.
And I remember coming out of ceremony and being like, I need to get out of here. I was like, I need to go back to my life. I was so full of excitement to like see the people that were around me and to build what I'm building and to work with my people and to experience my life.
Yeah.
And so it was such a beautiful code. And so a lot of these plant allies have been showing me a lot of this similar energy that I'm sharing today. So, you know, breathwork, psilocybin, ayahuasca, bobenzana. I'm a fan of LSD. I like to play. I like to experience. I like to try. You know, I play with MDMA, right? Not from a place of like, I'm going to see Benny Benassi, I'm going to pop 6 space biscuits. That's not the energy that I'm coming from, right? It's like, I want to use this substance to help me understand more about myself and help learn about a situation a little more, right? So it's a lot more intentional. But I really believe that these altered states of consciousness help us see on the periphery. They help us see the things that we either choose not to see or we've been basically programmed to not see from the experiences of our life. And so they kind of lift the veil, which to me is such a powerful, powerful experience.
Yeah. You live life with so much intention. I just feel it. And I know that the audience is really going to feel that as well with everything that you're saying. It's like intention with all of it. And I really have so much reverence for that and for you. And so where can our audience find out more about you, get in touch? Where's your work at? Do you have anything open for enrollment right now? Would love to know. Yeah,
definitely. So the best place to go is at Cam MacDougall on Instagram. That's definitely where you'll get all this stuff because it's always changing, right? We've got a lot of offering shifting, and that's the best place to connect with me. CamMacDougall.com is also a good place to check out everything that's going on. Right now, my team's building embodied.co, so I don't know when this is launching. So if Cam MacDougall isn't up anymore, then go to embodied.co. Okay, that's a great place to check out. So we've got retreats, we've got coaching, we've got experiences. We always have really random things popping up that we do to invite people into these types of things. So we've got Ignite events and all of these things that are popping up. So depending on when you're seeing this, there will be something there for you to explore and investigate.
There's a buffet. of options.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like pick your adventure.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Well,
Exactly.
thank you so much
Thank you.
for being here, for sharing your wisdom, your codes, for just being an incredible human. What a delight this conversation was, and an edgy one at that.
Yeah.
Maybe for both of us, and maybe for you listening. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. And to the audience, if you've taken something away from this conversation, we would love to know through either messaging one of us or tagging us in the Instagram stories. Please let us know, and definitely tune in next week. We'll see you there. Bye-bye.